Hi, and welcome to Roots of Faith. I'm Lee Loomis, Archivist for the Diocese of Baton Rouge, and today I have my pal again with me, Renee Richard, but we are not standing in front of a church. We are standing on a pier in Lake Verret. This is, actually we're standing on some ground that Renee's family owns, or at least the water over the ground that your family owns. But what we want to do today is explore the region where the chapel boat went and give you an idea of what the chapel boat was and why it was so important to this area. Renee, would you start with sort of orienting us as to where we are?
Okay. Lake Verret is a freshwater lake located in the heart of Assumption Parish, mainly on the western edge of Assumption Parish, which is the southernmost parish in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. Right now we are on the southeast edge of Lake Verret. It's a kidney bean shaped lake. Off to my left in I guess like a northwest direction, you'll see a cluster of houses off in the distance. That is what is the remnants of what was called the Attakapas Canal. It was a 10-mile canal that connected this lake with Bayou Lafourche and allowed a waterway from the Mississippi River to Bayou Lafourche through Lake Verret and into the interior back then, which is the Teche region or the Atchafalaya Basin. We do border on the basin here.
And we have a church up there.
There is a church. We've done a show on it. Immaculate Conception out of Napoleonville is 3 miles up what's now the Canal Road, because the old original canal is no longer in existence. They've since put a road there and blocked it up. Then we've got where the horizon is in the distance is roughly 14 miles by boat to Pierreport, which is on the northwestern end of Lake Verret, and a good 20-30 minute boat ride from here. And we won't visit there per se by boat, but the chapel boat was based out of Pierreport.
And we'll talk about it.
Sure. We won't be too far. Then off to my right, different direction in the southwest region. The furthest clump of trees is what you call Bayou Mexil. The chapel boat did visit there, and Bayou Mexil will take us to Bell River, which is another waterway that'll take us up to Bell River. We won't go as far as the northernmost point that we'll talk about a little later, but 4 Mile Bayou is another bayou that branches off that direction. So we're down literally in the heart of the swamp right now.
Okay, and I'm going to give a little bit of history about the boat itself. I do have a cheat sheet because there's a lot of facts and I want to make sure I get them correct. I do know that in 1936, I'm going to back up real quick. One of the things that we are extremely blessed with is that we have correspondence about this boat. We have a few articles that were written either in the Times-Picayune or in the Extension magazine about this mission because it was unique and it was so different and people wanted to know about it. Father Toups and Father Greco were the two that were here at the time that proposed the idea of a boat. This was 1936 because this area here was not serviceable by anything else but boat.
Right. No roads here.
Pirogues.
Pirogues only. There were fishermen, hunters, trappers living in this area almost exclusively, mainly of Acadian descent, perhaps some Canary Islanders on the northern end towards Pierreport. And these people lived off the land, and when cars came about, people shifted towards where there were roads, leaving this area pretty isolated and not as accessible by priests and cars. So
yeah, in 1936 you're the Depression and things are not moving very well.
They traveled by boat only.
Yeah, they traveled by boat only, and it wasn't going to be particularly motorized boat. It was going to be flat boat with a pole, with a paddle, and being able to go from one place to another. So this is an area sort of spread out, but it's communities along the banks. And how do you minister to these people? Well, Father Charles Greco, had an idea of building a chapel boat. The boat was graciously funded by a couple from New York, and we don't know their name. It may be in the books somewhere in the records of the Archdiocese of New Orleans. But for us, we do know that someone did put up the initial money. When Father Greco had the boat built, there were some dimensions. That's why I need my cheat sheet. The boat was 16 by 40, and the bedroom and kitchen for the priest was 8 by 16. The chapel itself was 16 by 20 with 3 windows on each side And there was a 7 by 16 section for the sanctuary and a 16 by 19 for the pews. 8 pews of 6 feet long on each side with a 4-foot aisle in between, making up 16 pews, which then enabled them to accommodate 64 people. So 64 people could get on this boat to be able to go to Mass. And then the cost, when it was finished, it was a barge construction of Oregon fir and pine, and the cost was $470. They named the boat, the chapel boat, Mary, Star of the Sea, and the tug, or the launch as it was called, was the St. Francis Xavier, and that's what pulled the chapel boat. The boat, when it was first put in, and we have some readings that we're going to give you all. We'll talk about some of the letters. We'll do the show a little different and have someone read some of the letters. When they initially put it in, the people were very surprised that they thought it was too small. They thought it wasn't, that there was going to be too many people on the banks. That proved to be true, but having it been smaller enabled the priest and his crew to navigate these small waterways. And we'll be able to see that as we travel ourselves through some of these waterways. Let's talk a little bit about those missions, though.
Correct. The northernmost mission that it served was Bayou Pigeon, which is up in Iberville Parish. So in some cases, you'll hear Father Tukes talk about how long it took him to get there. In some cases, 6 hours, 3 hours, depending on the current. From there, coming down Bell River, we did have Bayou Goodell. Very few families living in there, but Bayou Goodell was one of the mission areas. Bell River was another mission area. 4 Mile Bayou was a mission area. It would occasionally come up here to Canal, and it was based out of Pierreport Church. So it, of course, administered to the people of Pierreport.
So we have 4 to 5 missions, depending on Bayou Goodell, sometimes having people there and sometimes not. And as I said, we have an incredible amount of written material which enables us to retrace the area that the boat traveled and to be able to know how the priest felt when he was ministering to people that had not seen the sacraments at all before. Before we get in the boat, let's quickly take a break and look at a map, and then we'll get in our boat and go on our way.
Join Catholic Life Television every night at 9 p.m. for our evening prayer. These 3 precious minutes will strengthen your relationship with God as you examine your day and present your needs to the loving Father through meditation. Make your evening a time of peace and oneness with the Lord.
With new information, you can help prevent your child's asthma attacks and avoid the emergency room. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS or visit noattacks.org.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy
If you'd like a copy of any of our local programming, please call us at 225-242-0218 or visit our website at catholiclifetv.org.
Welcome back. We have our map so you can see where we're going and where we are now.
Kind of get you oriented to what we're talking about. This is Lake Verret, this kidney bean shape that we talked about, and we are at this little point right here on this little bayou. This is the landing where the canal took us up to Bayou Lafourche. The Immaculate Conception Church is right about in this vicinity. We're going to be traveling through this bayou here, which is Bayou McZeel, along the parish boundaries, and then down here, this is 4 Mile Bayou, where one of the missions was, and then we'll enter Bell River and travel Bell River up to the heart of Bell River. We will not be going to the furthest most point. which is in Iberville Parish, way up here by Bayou Pigeon, nor to Pierrepont because of the distance by water across the lake to get there with the limitations of the show. But this gives you a pretty good idea of the various missions throughout this lower Assumption Parish region. Assumption Parish dips down here, and this is actually the border to St. Mary's, St. Martin, Iberia Parish, and Iberville Parish. So this is a 5-parish region that the boat actually would visit. So that just gives a better perspective of where we're going to go and where we're going to visit.
We are currently in Belle River. This is about the furthest north that we are going to be able to go. If we continued north, we would actually get to Bayou Pigeon, which, as Renee showed you on the map, is the northernmost part of where the chapel boat went. This area in Belle River had quite a few people in it, and from the statistics that were gathered, often as that first boat came, there were 130 or 140 people that would attend Mass. Some of them were able to get on the boat. The men, if it was too crowded, since it only sat 64, if 130 people showed up, the men would stay on the banks and kneel and receive the sacraments from there, while the women and children were allowed to get on the chapel boat itself. Well, some of the other things that happened during that time is they taught religion classes, they heard penance. The priest would say Mass. If he was here for 2 days, he would say Mass in the morning. That would be the Sunday before. He would have Mass the next day. That would be the Sunday afterwards. This area here was pretty heavily populated for what we would consider an area along the waterways. So as I said, this is a part where they came, they did the missions. The St. Joseph Sisters came as well to work in the summer with the children, and we have some wonderful words from Father Toops.
March 21st, 1936 will remain a red letter day in the annals of St. Joseph's Parish, Pierrepont, for on that day the chapel boat, Mary Star of the Sea, towed by the powerful launch St. Francis Xavier, arrived at Pierrepont, ready for service on the waterways of this immense marine parish. During the next 2 weeks, things were put in readiness and word was sent to the different outposts so that the faithful could gather at the missions for Holy Mass and the reception of the sacraments. Visitors came from far and near to view this new instrument for the spread of the gospel. Some were enthusiastic. Others were skeptical. Could the work be done with this movable church? Would it be equal to the task? Time will answer these queries more fully, but we have every reason to believe that the data which follows justifies the most sanguine hopes of our Archbishop, our benefactors, and the pastor of St. Joseph's. Our own people were quick to size up the situation. The chapel is too small, they agreed upon seeing it. Subsequent events have proven this both true and false. After heading into the flood currents of Belle River, Bayou Godell, Old River, and Bayou Pigeon, we have to admit that a larger chapel would have been too bulky to tour around, for as it is, we spend 9 hours moving from 4 Mile Bayou to Bayou Pigeon, a distance of about 36 miles. However large the crowds for services, they have been taken care of. We have always managed to land the chapel boat near a high bank or levee, which serves as a kneeling place for the congregation, especially the men. April 3rd, we tied up at Belle River, and everything was in readiness for the first Mass. At sunrise, the first boat arrived and landed near the chapel. Before 7 o'clock, about 25 boats of all types had tied up, and the chapel was crowded by Mass time. There were 131 people present, and 35 received Holy Communion. Quite a few had been away from the sacraments for years.
As we're here in Bell River, you will see an awful lot of houses. One of the things you need to remember is that these houses did not look like that at the time that the chapel boat was coming. These are much more modern homes, and it's because there's roadbed. There's roadbed on either side of Bell River, and so cars are able to get here, equipment is able to get here in order to build the houses. Most of the houses that would have been here during the time of the chapel boat would be more of our smaller homes, wood structures, cypress built, screen porches, very small, 1, 2, 3 rooms at best, with large porches and areas that they could get their boats in and out of, because that was their way of travel. So just remember as we drive along here, that what you're seeing is our modern day Bell River.
The next move was to Bayou Pigeon, situated in Iberville Parish. This mission is a central trading post for the fishermen and trappers of the Grand Lake section. We had a strong head-on current to contend with and made the trip from Bell River in 6 hours. An enthusiastic reception awaited us here, and the fisher folk had gathered from miles around to attend to their religious duties. Arriving at the mission at about 3 p.m., the faithful gathered together to say the rosary, then the children were instructed in the catechism, and finally confessions until nightfall. April 21st, the crowd was too large for the chapel, and we had to ask the men to follow Holy Mass from the shore. 153 persons attended, and 64 received. That afternoon, the chapel again overflowed for rosary. Catechisms, confessions. April 22nd, 117 attended, and 29 received Holy Communion. It was with reluctance that we untied after Mass and pushed out into the swift current of Bayou Pigeon. The trip to Pierreport, using a shortcut through Bayou Grobec, was made in 3 hours, an average of 5 miles an hour. During the day, April 21st, hundreds of people came to visit the chapel, and I noticed the same ones returning 2 and 3 times, so I inquired. They just could not satisfy their eyes with looking at this new hope of the swamps. Like a child with a new toy, they had to make sure that this chapel was a reality, and their very own, always in fear, it seemed, lest it should vanish in thin air, like many another air castle they had built. At every station, as I announced that the first Mass would be for our benefactors, their eyes glowed, then dimmed with tears of appreciation and gratitude. They could hardly realize that this great miracle of Christianity had come true for them too. The gospel is being preached to the poor. April 23rd at 1 p.m., we set out to cross Lake Verret, a 14-mile body of water which lies mostly in Assumption Parish, and at whose southernmost end lies the little settlements of 4 Mile Bayou, itself situated in St. Martin Parish. Here again we were received with great joy by these good fisher folk. Here during the second day, when the Blessed Sacrament is kept in the tabernacle, I was trying to impress the children with a sense of the real presence and teaching them to genuflect, since most of them had never set foot in a church. After the instruction, I asked them to stand and genuflect together. So I clapped my hands for unison, and lo and behold, they all genuflected, clapping their hands. This little incident, perhaps amusing to the well-educated laity, strikes a note of pathos in the heart of the cleric who knows it will require years of patient labor to educate these good people in the rudiments of religion. During our 2 days' stay at this mission, 199 people attended the sacraments of penance and Holy Eucharist. Leaving this Bayou Maxwell into Belle River, we landed at the Belle River Mission after 3 hours of touring. Lest this narrative become tedious by repetition, we can say that the second tour was as fruitful of results as was the first, since it was not completed until near the end of Paschal time, and everyone had an opportunity to make his Easter duties.
If you see the old school bus, to the left of the school bus here in 4 Mile Bayou would have been the school. Obviously it's not here anymore, and as you pan and continue from that area to what they call the point, as we go around the bend here in 4 Mile Bayou, there was the Mission Church. The church was built in the 1940s. It would have been after the chapel boat would have been visiting this area, and obviously there were enough people here in this area to support the building of that small mission church.
Since the arrival of the chapel boat, one of the missions has been practically deserted, only 5 families remaining. This is Bayou Godel, only 4 miles from Belle River. At certain seasons, when the fishermen move to Grand Lake in their houseboats, this mission is not so important, as the few remaining families attended services at the Belle River Mission. However, during the winter and early spring, there were as many as 23 families there. Now, to give a resume of my ministrations on the chapel boat to date, 1,833 people attended Mass. 568 went to confession, and 1,343 communions were distributed. 81 little ones received communion for the first time, and 44 admitted to solemn communion after completing the 2 years course of instruction. 7 children were baptized, and 2 couples married.
Thank you for joining us here on Roots of Faith as we explored the waterways of our chapel boat from the 1930s. We visited missions, we saw alligators, we saw an eagle or 2. It really was a fun day. And I want to thank my friend Renee Richard and her parents for allowing us to be here on their portion of a little piece of God's country down in South Assumption. I also especially want to thank her dad, Mr. Sam Bergeron, for being our boat captain and showing us the waterways of where that chapel boat went. I also want to thank Mr. Grow, because Mr. Grow was able to tell us where the chapel was at 4 Mile Bayou, and without his assistance we would not have been able to find that little piece of land. If you or anybody that you know has pictures of the chapel boat or has pictures of the missions which no longer are there, we would love to have copies if you would share them with us. We'd love to be able to add them to this show and make this show a little bit better the next time it airs. It's been a wonderful day. The weather has cooperated, and we certainly hope that you will join us again the next time on Roots of Faith.